Alright, let's talk about this nightmarish being. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has a lot of weird stuff going on inside Area Zero. For the most part, I'm going to assume everyone's taken history class and read the Scarlet and Violet books because with the hints of something even more powerful, theories have been out of control. Heath, the explorer who ventured into Area Zero years ago, writes of a strange entity with an appearance like nothing we've ever seen. Described as resembling a disc and having a shell of overlapping hexagons, this being doesn't even sound like a Pokemon. We also know that Professor Sada or Turo know of this being as well, suspecting it's the cause of terrestrialization, and because they would be the ones to later invent the Terra Orb, it appears as if though they were right. We also know that the very crystals inside of Area Zero are the source that make nearly anything possible, from super advanced AI to time travel. With all of this information, a popular theory has emerged that all Paradox Pokemon were created from the imagination of Professor Sada and Turo. Through the power of this Pokemon that likely has reality warping abilities, especially because of the language used when describing the time travel phenomenon as something only dreamed of. Along with the fact that many of the Paradox Pokemon have supposedly outlandish origins, and we were also introduced to Pokemon that were definitely imagined up, it seems like a credible enough theory. But I'll go ahead and say that I don't buy it completely. Let's tackle the origins of the Paradox Pokemon first of all. For one thing, they seem to have existed during the expedition conducted by Heath. An example of either Great Tusk or Iron Treads is given with a sketch and a photograph. The general imagination theory states that Professor Sada and Turo were inspired to research time travel after reading the Scarlet and Violet book, and so then they imagined the Paradox Pokemon and thus they were created. But how does one exist in the past at all to be recorded in the Scarlet and Violet book in the first place? With all of the strange occurrences in Area Zero, it was implied that there was already some kind of time warping going on, and that by creating the time machine powered by the crystals it was possible to harness that ability, now able to intentionally bring Pokemon to the present. Though there is also the fact that most of the supposed lore behind these Pokemon is just not believable. I mean, that is because it comes from a magazine that was meant to be sensational and give whatever explanation it could for these weird creatures that were first described in the Scarlet and Violet books. It's a play on the very concept of sensationalist theories and magazines. Some of these are plausible enough and others are just not. So overall, when it comes to the Paradox Pokemon, we just have to believe what we're told by the more credible characters, that they do in fact come from a different point in time. That said, I think we're definitely getting Pokemon spawned out of the imagination solely because we were shown 2 fusions, and because we know that the Terra Crystals and the being that is the source of them has some sort of immense power. So yeah, let's talk about the Disc Pokemon. I feel like in a way it's similar to what we saw with Eternamax Eternatus, which is the strongest Pokemon we've seen to date and had an appearance more akin to Eldritch Abominations. And it had the ability to greatly increase the power of a Pokemon being the source of the Dynamax phenomenon, even also being capable of warping time and space based on what we saw in the background of the battle against it. So I think that the Disc being is something similar. Just now that this one allows Pokemon to become different types through terrestrialization, creates crystals with their own power, and potentially can warp time in reality. We know that Heath meets this being because he writes about encountering it after being separated from the rest of the group. There is another entry detailing events when he was separated, saying that he was found unconscious with no memory, and was holding a piece of paper with his own handwriting on it. I would think that both of these happened together. He met this strange being and the secrets of time travel were revealed to him in some way, so he wrote everything down and it was saved for later. But after being in the presence of this thing, his memory was wiped or altered. The point is that the large disc-shaped entity surely exists and has a lot of power, potentially capable of warping time, space, reality, memories, all of that. So then where does that leave the 2 Pokemon that were definitely imagined by some of the researchers? Well, I think they're just exactly that, just fun little drawings that they made up because that's exactly what we're told. Based on their knowledge of stories of the legendary beast or Swords of Justice, they created these fusions. But it's interesting that we're shown these 2 drawings at all because they're the result of specific Pokemon. Out of all Pokemon games, the Johto and Unova games are the farthest removed at this point in time. Last we saw them was 10 years ago. These Pokemon are the perfect idea to serve as nods to those games while giving the possibility of a new form later down the line. And if these are Pokemon that will be created from an idea, it's a fun way to play around with these designs in a fusion, without compromising the lore that already exists. I don't think these are Paradox Pokemon, I think these are Dream Pokemon. It would make no sense to have a Pokemon that comes from the past that looks like a fusion of Raikou, Suicune, and Entei, because they already have an origin being revived by Ho-Oh. But a creature dreamt up by an artist exploring Area Zero where a being able to alter reality lurks beneath the surface? Perfect. Also, side note, it almost feels like something hinted at with the fact that Sonia was researching the Swords of Justice in the Crown Tundra. And look at that, we can even read her book in the school library. Anyway, back to these two Pokemon as well as the disc being. These would initially appear to be weird lore added onto the Scarlet and Violet book, either being loose ends or teasers for the future. I think the latter is more possible because the prospect of large-scale DLC for the main series is more expected at this point, after having gotten it for Sword and Shield. We're all thinking it sometime later this year we'll get the storyline where we meet the disc being and it'll create one of these Pokemon from the imagination. And I think because that plot element is so obvious based on the information we've gotten, the idea of Pokemon originating from the imagination has spilled over from these two yet-to-be-seen fusion Pokemon into the already existing Paradox Pokemon where the story seems to have told us that they're separate. Those are just some of my long overdue thoughts about these strange creatures of Area Zero and the persisting imagination theory. Clearly we'll be getting some kind of dream Pokemon, I just don't think that the Paradox Pokemon fall into that. But if the DLC gives us any confirmation, sure, let's go with it. So let me know what you think about all these monsters and what your hopes for the future are. For the most part, I think I'm basically done talking about Scarlet and Violet, maybe a few more smaller videos here and there, but I'm pretty much ready to move on and wait expectantly for any news about where we go from here. It's a whole new year and we're all allowed to dream just a little bigger. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, especially the Great Gators, Justin, Cosmo Zero, Michaela, Mr. Pig Puncher, Phantom Pyro, Quago, Volity, and Pastel Blood. If you would like to support, get your name shouted out here as well as access to emotes and comments and live streams and maybe sometimes early videos, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter for more memes. But anyway, this has been GatorEX, and I'll catch you all later.
You can conquer new opponents with Pokemon Trading Card Game Black and White Noble Victories. Over 50 newly discovered Pokemon, plus a TCG Online code card in every theme deck. Each theme deck of 60 cards sold separately, one code card per theme deck.
You could say investigating this is a bit of homework, and it's exhausting.